Happy Thursday, guys. We're going to start today with a new section, Chapter 10, Section 3. This is the last one in Chapter 10, so you guys will have a quiz on Friday after the lecture today. After you answer your questions, you will go through and fill out a study guide, and then your quiz will be on Friday. So we will go ahead and begin here with giving you the main idea. I want you to follow along on your notes like normal. I want you to highlight whenever there's yellow on the screen. And I want you to write the answers to the questions on the back of your note page. So, today, we're going to talk about the new technologies that help produce a mass culture in the 20s. And this was a mass culture very different than before. And we're going to talk about how that was different. We'll talk about entertainment changing the 20s, cultural heroes of the 20s, and how this era was reflected in the arts and literature. Alright, so first slide here, I want you to highlight the first bullet. During the 20s, the radio went from being little known to being standard equipment in everybody's home. So before the 20s, not a lot of people had a radio. Not a lot of people listened to the radio. There was not these radio programs that you could sit and listen to. There was not music on the radio. It was very different from what it is today. But as they started adding music, as they started adding stations, people started listening, and it became a very common pastime for them. And so here you see on your next slide that this was called kind of a shared experience of Americans. Presidents are going to start using this to their advantage, the radio. Advertisement is going to become huge on the radio, taking advantage of that. And radio stations start to develop, something that had yet to become a thing. All right. So during the 20s, I want you to remember, radios became a huge product. Alright, movies also are going to expand in popularity during the 20s. Early years, your movies were short, simple pieces, and over time, they're going to grow kind of into what they are today. The first kind of version of the movies, they didn't have dialogue in them. They just had music as actors would act out the scene. And this was a huge pastime for Americans. They would go and watch these movies and pay to see them. Now, one clip that we're going to watch here in just a second is going to be the first so-called talkie. Alright, and on this slide I want you to highlight that word there, a talkie, and the second bullet underneath. This is when they're starting to incorporate dialogue into the movies rather than just music. This was in The Jazz Singer, and this was a hugely successful movie that incorporated a few lines of dialogue. Not the whole movie like we know today, but a few lines. And like I said, this is known as a talkie. So after the lecture today, you're going to click on the link on Google Classroom, and I want you to watch the short clip of The Jazz Singer so you can kind of see what we're talking about. Alright, so by the end of the 20s, you see there on your last bullet, Americans bought 100 million movie tickets a week. Alright, though the entire U.S. population was about 123 million people. So, a lot of people going to the movies, a lot of people going to movies multiple times per week. Alright, flip your notes over, and on the back, I want you to write number 1, and I want you to answer this question here. What were talkies? Alright, so what were talkies? Write that down on the back of your notes, and then you can flip over. Alright. Now, The next slide here, we're going to talk about film stars. So when you have an industry like the movies start to become very, very popular and a lot of money going into the industry, you're going to see an increase in film stars. And people are going to start to kind of idolize those stars. And that's why we see the development of the film star heroes. So in the 20s, you see a new kind of celebrity, and that's our movie star. First one we're going to talk about here is Charlie Chaplin. And I want you to highlight his name and the fact that he was a comedian. All right. You had Rudolph Valentino, which was, he was a lead man of the romantic films. And many others that were known for specific roles in these movies. Okay. But this is your new kind of celebrity in the 20s. Another huge type of celebrity in the 20s is going to be the pilots. And here you see, we're going to talk about two. First up is Charles Lindbergh. He was a pilot who practiced his skills as kind of dangerously in life-threatening jobs. And he did this because he enjoyed it for fun. I want you to highlight the first bullet and part of the second. He heard about the prize to fly over the nonstop transatlantic flight. And I want you to know what a transatlantic flight is. That is going to be on your quiz. This is a flight across the Atlantic Ocean. He wanted to win the movie, and like we already said, he was a daredevil. Or the money, not the movie. And he was a daredevil, so he took on the chance there. He rejected the idea that he needed a large plane. So he developed a very light single-engine craft with only room for one pilot, which would be him. He did succeed in touching down in Paris, France, after 33 and a half hours from New York. So a 33 and a half hour flight, and he won that competition. All right, and he earned the nickname Lucky Lindy. So he was a very loved pilot, a very loved hero of the 20s. All right, your next question has to deal with Lucky Lindy. So I want you to flip your notes over on the back, and I want you to answer. In 1927, people around the world were thrilled by radio reports of Charles Lindbergh's successful solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Movie newsreels featuring the young, handsome pilot helped make him an international hero. So, taking from what you read there, you listened to there, what was a larger impact of Lindbergh's accomplishment? A, it improved relations between the U.S. and France. B, it demonstrated the airplane's ability to be used as a long-range bomber. C, it helped launch the age of commercial passenger aviation. Or D, it made people realize the U.S. could not isolate itself from world events. So what do you think? After those answer choices, what is the correct answer? All right, write that down. That is number 2. Flip your notes over and highlight Miss Amelia Earhart. All right, this was a little over a year after Lindbergh's fight. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, returning as a U.S. hero. Okay, much like Lucky Lindy, the American people viewed her as a hero. And I want you to highlight, I know it's not yellow on your screen, but go ahead and highlight that first bullet. She will be on your quiz. She set numerous records when flying in speed and distance, but about a decade later, she was on her way through a record-breaking flight around the world, and she mysteriously disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. So there's all kinds of theories as to what happened to Amelia Earhart, none proven with solid evidence. So it's an interesting thing to research, to read about. All right, one of the last things we're going to talk about here is going to be the sports heroes of the 20s. Sports become a major pastime of the 20s. A lot of people taking part in listening to them on the radios, and also going to watch games. So there, the first bullet tells you that the radio helped inflame the public passion for sports. and millions of Americans turned to the broadcast of ball games, prize fights featuring their favorite athletes. So we'll go through a few of those athletes, some that you've probably heard before, maybe some that you haven't. First up, we have Helen Wills. She was a tennis player, winning 33 major tournaments and 2 Olympic gold medals. All right, the next one here we have Babe Ruth that I want you to highlight. He, and I'm sure you are familiar with, was known on the field for his home runs. And he is a hero that is still remembered today in baseball. Alright, your next one we're going to talk about is Bobby Jones. Jones won golf's first Grand Slam, which means he won the game's 4 major tournaments. And remains the only golfer to get a Grand Slam for matches in 1 calendar year. Alright, so flip over to the back of your questions there, or your notes. I want you to answer this question. In the 20s, the public's devotion to movie stars was matched by America's idealization of those who excelled in what? A, politics, B, sports, C, medicine, or D, science. What do you think? Write your answer down. This is number 3. And then flip your notes back over. We have a few slides left. Alright. Now, art was also a major culture change of the 20s. You have a lot of authors, a lot of musicians coming into play here. First one we're going to talk about is F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I want you to highlight his name. He helped create the flapper image, and we talked about the flapper a few days ago. That was the young rebellious girl who, cut her hair, wore makeup, smoked cigarettes, raised her hemline. The rebel of the 20s. He created that image in his writing, one which you guys are very familiar with because I believe you read this year, and that is The Great Gatsby. Alright, you also had Sinclair Lewis, who wrote about the emptiness of the middle class. Ernest Hemingway, I want you to highlight his name. He was a war veteran, and he wrote about those war experiences. The last one on your page here, George Gershwin, was a composer that you may have learned about in arts and humanities or your music classes back in the day. And his work showed the impact of jazz. Alright, so you should have all your notes filled in now. I want you to flip over, answer this last question. This is number 4. The writing of who helped create the image of the flapper in the 20s? Alright, A, B, C, or D? What is your answer? Write it on the back. And then we're going to turn our notes in for credit. And then we will pass those back so that you can have them to complete your study guide. So Chapter 10 quiz tomorrow. You have 3 sections of notes. You wrote Cornell notes, so you can access those on Google Classroom. There's a Quizlet link that I will put at the top of Google Classroom. But right now, I want you to go there to the stream, and I want you to play the short clip of the jazz singer so that you can see what a talkie actually was like in the 20s.